Huzzah! Oh man, I'm getting a little tired, but it's okay. My voice it sounds tired too. You know who's with me? Curious George. And it's been a long day. It's been a really long day. And I have probably another 8 more hours where I have to be active, so it's interesting. It's very interesting. But I think we're doing fine, so I don't mind. These annoyances were petty, though, and Ender persuaded himself to accept them as another form of practice, another form of praise. Already the other armies were beginning to imitate Ender. Now most soldiers attack with their knees tucked under them. Formations were breaking up now, and more commanders were sending out tunes to slip along the walls. None had caught on yet to Ender's 5-tune organization. It gave him the slight advantage that when they had accounted for the movements of 4 units, they wouldn't be looking for a 5th. Ender was teaching them all about low gravity tactics, but where could Ender go to learn new things? He began to use the video room, filled with propaganda vids about Mazer Rackham and the other great commanders of the forces of humanity in the first and second invasion. Ender stopped the general practice an hour early and allowed his tune leaders to conduct their own practice in his absence. Usually they staged skirmishes, tune against tune. Ender stayed long enough to see that things were going well, then left to watch the old battles. Most of the vids were a waste of time. Heroic music, close-ups of commanders and medal-winning soldiers, confused shots of Marines invading bugger installations, but here and there he found useful sequences, ships like points of light maneuvering in the dark of space. Or better still, the lights on the shipboard plotting screen showing the whole of the battle. It was hard from the videos to see all 3 dimensions, and the scenes were often short and unexplained, but Ender began to see how well the buggers used seemingly random flight paths to create confusion, how they used decoys and false retreats to draw the eye of ships into traps. Some battles had been cut into many scenes, which were scattered through various videos. By watching them in sequence, Ender was able to reconstruct whole battles. He began to see things that the official commentators never mentioned. They were always trying to arouse pride in human accomplishments and loathing of the buggers. That Ender began to wonder how humanity had won it all. Human ships were sluggish. Fleets responded to new circumstances unbearably slow, while the bugger fleet seemed to act in perfect unity, responding to each challenge instantly. Of course, in the first invasion, the human ships were completely unsuited to fast combat, but then so were the bugger ships. It was only in the second invasion that the ships and weapons were swift and deadly. So it was from the buggers, not the humans, that Ender learned strategy. He felt ashamed and afraid of learning from them, since they were the most terrible enemy, ugly and murderous and loathsome, but they were also very good at what they did, to a point. They always seemed to follow one basic strategy only: gather the greatest number of ships at the key point of conflict. They never did anything surprising, anything that seemed to show either brilliance or stupidity in a subordinate officer. Discipline was apparently very tight, but there was one oddity. There's plenty of talk about Mazer Rackham, but precious little video of his actual battle. Some scenes from early in the battle, Rackham's tiny force looking pathetic against the vast power of the main bugger fleet. The buggers had already beaten the main human fleet out in the Comet Shield, wiping out their earliest starships and making a mockery of human attempts at high strategy. That film was often shown to arouse again and again the agony and terror of the bugger victory. In the fleet coming to Mazer Rackham's little force near Saturn, the hopeless odds, and then one shot from Mazer Rackham's little cruiser. One enemy ship blowing up. That's all was ever shown. Lots of film showing Marines carving their way into bugger ships, lots of bugger corpses lying around inside. But no film of buggers killing in personal combat, unless it was spliced in from the first invasion. It frustrated Ender that Mazer Rackham's victory was so obviously censored. Students in the battle school had much to learn from Mazer Rackham, and everything about his victory was concealed from view. Their passion for secrecy was not very helpful to the children who had learned to accomplish again what Mazer Rackham had done. Of course, as soon as word got around that Ender Wiggin was watching the war vids over and over again, the video room began to draw a crowd. Almost all were commanders watching the same vids Ender watched, pretending they understood why he was watching them and what he was getting out of it. Ender never explained anything, even when he showed seven scenes from the same battle, but from different vids. Only one boy asked tentatively, "Are some of those from the same battle?" Ender only shrugged, as if it didn't matter. It was during the last hour of practice on the 7th day, only a few hours after Ender's army had won its 7th battle, that Major Anderson came into the video room. He handed a slip of paper to one of the commanders sitting there, and then he spoke to Ender. Colonel Graff wishes to see you in his office immediately. Ender got up and followed Anderson through the corridors. Anderson palmed the locks that kept students out of the officers' quarters. Finally, they came to where Graff had taken root on a swivel chair bolted to the steel floor. His belly spilled over both armrests now, even where he sat upright. Ender tried to remember. Graff hadn't seemed particularly fat at all when Ender first met him, only 4 years ago. Time and tension were not being kind to the administrator of the battle school. 7 days since your first battle, Ender, said Graff. Ender did not reply. You won seven battles once a day. Ender nodded. Your scores are unusually high, too. Ender blinked. To what, Commander, do you attribute your remarkable success? You gave me an army that does whatever I can think for it to do. And what have you thought for it to do? We orient downward toward the enemy gate and use our lower legs as a shield. We avoid formations and keep our mobility. It helps that I've got 5 teams of 8 instead of 4 of 10. Also, our enemies haven't the time to respond effectively to our new techniques, so we keep beating them with the same tricks. That won't hold up for long. So you don't expect to keep winning, not with the same tricks. Graff nodded. Sit down, Ender. Ender and Anderson both sat. Graff looked at Anderson, and Anderson spoke next. What condition is your army in fighting so often? You're all veterans now, but how are they doing? Are they tired? If they are, they won't admit it. Are they still alert? You're the ones with the computer games that play with people's minds. You tell me. We know what we know. We want to know what you know. These are very good soldiers, Major Anderson. I'm sure they have limits, but we haven't reached them yet. Some of the newer ones are having trouble because they'd never really mastered some of the basic techniques, but they're working hard and improving. What do you want me to say? That they need to rest? Of course they need to rest. They need a couple of weeks off. The studies are shot to hell. None of us are doing any good in our classes. But you know what? Apparently you don't care. So why should I? Graff and Anderson exchanged glances. Ender, why are you studying the videos of the Bugger Wars? To learn strategy, of course. Those videos were created for propaganda purposes. All our strategies have been edited out. I know. Graff and Anderson exchanged glances again. Graff drummed on his table. You don't play the fantasy game anymore, he said. Ender didn't answer. Tell me why you don't play it. Because I won. You never win anything. You never win everything that game. There's always more. I won. Ender, we want you to be as happy as possible, but if you want to make me the best soldier possible, go down and look at the standings. Look at the all-time standings. So far, you're doing an excellent job with me. Congrats. Now, when are you going to put me up against a good army? Graff's set lips turned into a smile, and he shook a little with silent laughter. Anderson handed Ender a slip of paper. Now, he said. Bonso, Madrid, Salamander Army, 1200. That's 10 minutes from now, said Ender. My army will be in the middle of showering up after practice. Graff smiled. Better hurry then, boy. We got to the army barracks 5 minutes later. Most were dressing after their showers. Check this out. Right. I don't have it. Can't crack my back. Most were dressing after the shower. Some had already gone to the game room or the video room to wait for lunch. He sent 3 younger boys to call everyone in and made everyone else dress for the battle as quickly as they could. This one's hot and ready, and there's no time. They gave Bonso notice about 20 minutes ago, and by the time we get to the door, they'll have been inside for a good 5 minutes at least. The boys were outraged, complaining loudly in the slang they used that they usually avoided around the commander. What are they doing to us? They be crazy, nah? Forget why. We'll worry about that tonight. Are you tired? Flymolo answered. We worked our butts off in practice today, not to mention beating the crap out of the Ferret army this morning. Same day, nobody ever do 2 battles, said Crazy Tom. Ender answered it the same. Nobody ever beat Dragon Army either. This be your big chance to lose? Ender's taunting question was the answer to the complaints. Win first, ask question later. All of them were back in the room, and most of them were dressed. Move, shouted Ender, and they ran alongside him, some of them still dressing when they reached the corridor outside the battle room, many of them still panting, a bad sign. They were too tired for this battle. The door was already open. There were no stars at all, just empty space in a dazzlingly bright room. Nowhere to hide, not even the darkness. My heart, said Crazy Tom. They haven't come out at either. Ender put his hand across his own mouth to tell them to be silent. With the door open, Of course, the enemy would hear every word they said. Ender pointed all around the door. That salamander army was undoubtedly deployed against the wall all around the door, where they couldn't be seen but easily could be flashed by anyone who came out. Ender motioned for all of them to back away from the door. Then he pulled forward a few of the taller boys, including Crazy Tom, and made them kneel, not squatting back to sit on their heels, but fully upright, so they formed an L with their bodies. He flashed them and silenced the army watched him. He selected the smallest boy, Bean, handed him Tom's gun, and made Bean kneel on Tom's frozen legs. Then he pulled Bean's hands, each holding a gun, through Tom's armpits. Now the boys understood. Tom was a shield, an armored spacecraft, and Bean was hiding inside. He was certainly not invulnerable, but he would have time. Ender assigned 2 more boys to throw Tom and Bean through the door, but signaled them to wait. He went on through the army, quickly assigning groups of 4, a shield, a shooter, and 2 throwers. Then, when they were all frozen or armed or ready to go, he signaled the throwers to pick up their burdens, throw them through the door, then jump through themselves. "Move!" shouted Ender. They moved. 2 at a time, the shield pairs went through the door, backwards so that the shield would be between the shooter and the enemy. And the enemy opened fire at once, but they mostly hit the frozen boy in front. In the meantime, with 2 guns to work with and the targets neatly lined up and spread flat along the wall, the dragons had an easy time of it. It was almost impossible to miss, and as the throwers also jumped through the door, they got handholds at the same wall with the enemy, shooting at a deadly angle so the salamanders couldn't figure out what to shoot at. The shield pairs slaughtering them from above, the throwers shooting them at their own level. By the time Ender himself came through the door, the battle was over. It hadn't taken a full minute from the time the first dragon passed through the door until the shooting stopped. Dragon had only lost 20 frozen and disabled, and only 12 boys were... Dragon had lost 20 frozen and disabled, and only 12 boys were undamaged. It was their worst score yet, but they had won. When Major Anderson came out and gave Ender the hook, Ender could not contain his anger. "I thought you were going to put us up an enemy that could match us in a fair fight." "Congratulations on the victory, Commander." "Beam!" shouted Ender. "If you had commanded Salamander Army, what would have you done?" Beam, disabled but not completely frozen, called out from where he drifted near the enemy door. "Keep a shifting pattern of movement going in front of the door. You should never hold still when the enemy knows exactly where you are. As long as you're cheating it," Ender said to Anderson. "Why don't you train the other army to cheat intelligently?" "I suggest that you remobilize your army," said Anderson. Ender pressed the buttons to thaw both armies at once. "Dragon Army dismissed," he shouted immediately. There would be no elaborate formation to accept the surrender of the other army. This had not been a fair fight. Even though they had won, the teachers meant them to lose, and it was only Bonso's ineptitude that had saved them. There was no glory in that. Only as Ender himself was leaving the battle room did he realize that Bonso would not realize that Ender was angry at the teachers. Spanish honor. Bonso would only know that he'd been defeated even when the odds were stacked in his favor. That Ender had the youngest child in his army publicly state what Bonso should have done to win, and that Ender had not even stayed to receive Bonso's dignified surrender. If Bonso had not already hated Ender, he would surely have begun. And hating him as he did, this would surely turn his murderous rage murderous. Bonso was the last person to strike, thought Ender. I'm sure he has not forgotten that. Nor had he forgotten the bloody affair in the battle room when the older boys tried to break up Ender's practice session, nor had many others. They were hungry for blood then. Bonso will be thirsting for it now. Ender toyed with the idea of taking advanced personal defense, but with battles now possible not only every day, but twice in the same day, Ender knew he could not spare the time. "I have to take my chances. The teachers got me into this, they can keep me safe." Bean flopped down on his bunk in utter exhaustion. Half the boys in the barrack were already asleep, and it was still 15 minutes before lights out. Wearily, he pulled his desk from its locker and signed on. There is a test tomorrow in geometry, and Bean was woefully unprepared. He could always reason things out if he had enough time, and he had read Euclid when he was 5, but the test had a time limit, so there wouldn't be a chance to think. He had to know, and he didn't know, and he would probably do badly on the test, but they had won twice today, so he felt good. And as soon as he signed on, however, all the thoughts of geometry were banished. A message paraded around the desk. "See me at once, Ender." Time was 21:50, only 10 minutes before lights out. How long ago had Ender sent it? Still, he'd better not ignore it. There might Another battle in the morning. The thought made him weary, and whatever Ender wanted to talk to him about, there wouldn't be time then. So Ender rolled off the bunk and walked emptily to the corridor to Ender's room. He knocked. "Come in," said Ender. "Just saw your message." "Fine," said Ender. It's near lights out. I'll help you find your way in the dark. I just didn't know if you knew what time I always know what time it is." Oh. Bean sighed inwardly. It never failed. Whenever he had any conversation with Ender, it turned into an argument. Bean hated it. He recognized Ender's genius and honored him for it. Why couldn't Ender ever see anything good in him? "Remember 4 weeks ago, Bean, when you told me to make you a toon leader? I've made 5 toon leaders and 5 assistants since then, and none of them was you." And Ender raised his eyebrows. "Was I right?" "Yes, sir." "So tell me how you've done these 8 battles. Today was the first time they disabled me, but the computer listed me as getting 11 hits before I had to stop. I'd never had less than 5 hits in a battle. I've also completed every assignment I've been given. Why did they make you a soldier so young, Bean? No younger than you were, but why?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do, and so do I. I've tried to guess, but they're just guesses. You're very good, and they knew that. They pushed you ahead. Tell me why, Bean." "Because they need us, that's why." Bean sat down on the floor and stared at Ender's feet. "Because they need someone to beat the buggers. That's the only thing they care about." I'm going to end there, honey, okay? I love you very much, Kenzie. Bye-bye.